Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. You've seen the castles. You've heard the tales of gallant knights, of dragons and damsels and kings who ruled with iron fists over muddy kingdoms. But what if I told you that the real medieval world, the one without the fairy dust, was a place of back pain, bitter turnips, and constant, unrelenting discomfort? So before we fall back in time, do me a small favor. Like this video, subscribe if you genuinely enjoy the strange blend of boring and brutal we serve here, and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are. I love seeing how many of you tune in from across the world and across sleepless hours. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. And let's slip together into tonight's story. One that doesn't require dragons or magical swords to be terrifying. Tonight's journey. What surviving a medieval life was really like. You're not a knight, a noble, or a wizard with a spellbook. No. Tonight, you're you. Dropped into the thick of the 14th century, without prep, privilege, or even a clean pair of socks. Forget what the movies showed you. This isn't jousting tournaments and romantic candlelit banquets. This is crooked teeth, scabby legs, cold soup, and a family goat that sleeps closer to your face than your spouse ever will. This is medieval life, the real version. You're about to wake up in a world where the air smells like wet straw and old onions, where bathing is more rumor than ritual, and where a trip to the toilet might mean navigating a ladder, a bucket, and a deep, personal reckoning. This isn't a history lesson. It's a survival story. Yours. You'll rise in the dark, rub sleep from your eyes with fingers calloused from a lifetime of work, and shiver against the damp wool wrapped around your aching body. You'll eat things you don't recognize, drink things you shouldn't, and spend most of your day either working, praying, or desperately trying to avoid dying of something that now has a vaccine. This isn't a heroic tale. It's a quiet, slow unraveling of what life was like when comfort was a myth, and every day was a small miracle of not freezing, starving, or falling face first into a trench full of yesterday's decisions. But don't worry, you're not alone. I'll walk with you through the stench, the superstition, and the snoring of strangers who definitely didn't brush their teeth. We'll go hour by hour through a medieval day. We'll wake up on scratchy straw, chew on chewy bread, scratch lice that scratch back, and by the time night falls again, you'll have a whole new appreciation for clean socks and central heating. So tuck yourself in, let the darkness settle, and prepare yourself for a long, itchy, profoundly humbling night in the Middle Ages. This is your story now. You wake up slowly, but not gently. There's no snooze button, no soft sheets, no filtered sunlight peeking through gentle linen curtains. What wakes you is the sound of coughing, dry, persistent, and too close. Someone, probably your cousin, or maybe just a neighbor who never left, is hacking up something unfortunate on the other side of the room. You shift and feel straw poking through the thin sack beneath you. It crunches as you move. It also itches. Everywhere. You're lying on a straw-stuffed mattress, if you can call it that. The fabric casing has long since worn thin, exposing clumps of yellowing hay and, well, let's hope that's just hay. The The straw has been reused for years. It's home now to fleas, mites, and possibly a few things with legs you don't want to count. You feel the tiny bites on your ankles before you're even fully conscious. It's dark. Not quiet dark. Not cozy dark. Just dim and oppressive, like the inside of a moldy boot. The single tiny window in the room is no bigger than a dinner plate, and it's not made of glass. Glass is for cathedrals and dead bishops. Your window is a stretched sheet of animal stomach, nailed into the frame to block the wind. It filters the light into a pale, sickly yellow glow that doesn't illuminate so much as confirm that yes, this is your life now. The room smells exactly like it looks. Earthy, damp, slightly sour. There's the scent of old wool, sweat, mildew, and the unmistakable tang of wood smoke. Somewhere, under all that, is the faint ammonia bite of chamber pot. It's in the corner. You see it now, half covered by a scrap of linen that does nothing to hide what's in it. You try not to breathe too deeply. The ceiling above you is low, wooden, and smoke-stained. The thatched roof leaks in 3 places, but it only drips when it rains, which conveniently it rained last night. So now the floor, hardened earth, is a patchwork of damp, muddy footprints and hay mush. You wriggle your toes, trying to find a dry spot. You hear movement. To your right, someone else is waking up. A child, probably. You can't tell who. It's too dark to see faces clearly. Families sleep close, partly for warmth, partly because there's nowhere else to go. Beds are shared, bodies pressed together like badly rolled laundry. Some are related, some are not. It doesn't really matter anymore. Privacy is not part of your vocabulary. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a fancy way of saying sticks smeared with mud and hope. You can hear everything. The snoring, the wheezing, the low mutter of a dreamer. And now, outside the thin wooden door, the faint clucking of a chicken trying to break into a sack of grain someone forgot to tie shut. Congratulations, you've survived another medieval night. You sit up slowly, not out of leisure, but because if you do it too fast, your back might seize up. You're not old, barely into adulthood, but your spine already crackles like firewood. Sleeping on straw, curled like a salted pretzel, will do that. Your shirt, a coarse linen tunic, sticks to your skin. Not with sweat, but with the accumulated grease of repeated use. You haven't washed it in days, not because you're lazy, but because laundry requires hauling water, heating it, and scrubbing it with ashes. Today is not a laundry day. Neither was yesterday, and probably not tomorrow. Your feet are bare. They always are indoors. You reach for your hose, woolen leg coverings that never quite stay up, and begin the complicated ritual of putting them on while pretending you're not sitting in mud. You shiver. The fire has long since gone out, and the room is cold. Not the dramatic kind of cold. Not icy or dramatic. Just bone-deep, subtle cold. The kind that makes your fingers ache and your breath hang in the air like a guilty thought. Someone else stirs beside you. An older woman, maybe your mother, maybe just someone who lives in the same space, begins murmuring a prayer. She's not especially devout. No one is. Not really. But you say the words anyway. It's less about faith and more about tradition. and fear. The church is always listening, even when God isn't. You rub your eyes with the back of your hand, scratch the side of your face, and wince as you pull something small and possibly alive from your hair. You flick it away. A flea? A louse? A tiny demon sent to punish you for eating too much pottage last night? Hard to say. You try not to think about it. The day is beginning. You reach for your belt, a piece of knotted rope or worn leather, cracked from years of use, and tie it around your tunic to look modest. Even now, modesty is expected, especially indoors. You never know who might walk in. A neighbor, a priest, a distant cousin with no sense of personal space. The door doesn't lock. Why would it? Through the thin wall, you hear a pig grunt. It's yours. Technically, you share ownership with 3 other families. You hope it hasn't gotten into the grain again. If it does, there'll be no bread this week. You can't afford that. Not with taxes due and the miller still angry about last month's payment. The pig, like everyone else, is overworked, underfed, and absolutely done with the 14th century. The child beside you is fully awake now. They begin to cough. Not a small cough, but a wet, rattling one that sounds like it came from their toes. You glance over, and for a moment you wonder, plague? Probably not. Hopefully not. More likely it's just the standard seasonal lung rot everyone gets. If it is plague, well, then things are going to get significantly worse. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today, you need to get up. There's no mattress to fluff, no coffee brewing, no phone to check. Your morning routine is as simple as it is sad. Pull on your second tunic, if you own one. Shake out your cloak. Avoid stepping in the chamber pot. And start moving before the warmth of your bed, such as it was, slips away entirely. Outside, the village is already stirring. Roosters crow. Hooves clop in the distance. Someone yells about a missing chicken. The sun has not yet risen above the trees, but the day has begun. It waits for no one, not even you. You step toward the door and duck low, not because you're tall, but because the door is criminally short. Most medieval head injuries are structural. You open the door and blink against the gray light. The sky is pale. The air smells of smoke and wet soil. Your breath fogs. Somewhere in the mist, a bell tolls. Distant, solemn. Maybe for a prayer. Maybe for a death. You walk into the day. Your feet are cold. Your stomach is already rumbling. And you've got 13 hours of work ahead of you before you're allowed to come back and lie on that itchy, creaky pile of straw again. Welcome to the Middle Ages. You'd think that after crawling out of a damp, overpopulated room that smelled like boiled goat and human regret, you'd be rewarded with something comforting, something warm, nourishing. You are not. Instead, your stomach growls impatiently as you crouch near the fire pit, a hollow circle of stones in the middle of the single shared room, and stare at the sorry little ember that managed to survive the night under its protective blanket of ash. It's still glowing, barely, like the last spark of enthusiasm in your heart. If you're lucky, it'll catch again. If not, it's flint, steel, and another round of desperate muttering that might end in actual prayer. Fire is life. Not metaphorically, literally. If you don't get it going, you don't eat. You don't boil water. You don't survive. Once you coax the fire back into a modest flicker, you toss in a few sticks, maybe a chunk of half-dry peat if you have any. It stinks when it burns, like smoking socks, but it lasts longer than wood. And besides, no one here has smelled good since the last crusade. You grab the cooking pot. It's blackened with soot, dented on one side, and filled with something that was also in it yesterday, and possibly the day before that. This is pottage, your daily companion, a perpetual stew that simmers all day and all night, and gains complexity mainly because you keep forgetting what went in it last week. Breakfast, then, is not a meal. It's more of a survival tactic. You ladle out a portion of thin, grayish broth into a wooden bowl. Bits of barley float in it, along with the occasional limp piece of onion or turnip. There's no meat. Not this early in the day. Not unless something died in the night. And even then, there are rules about who gets what. You chew slowly. The pottage tastes like water and boiled effort. You tear off a chunk of bread, if there's any left. It's stale, of course, hard enough to double as a tool. You soften it in the soup, and it becomes chewable if you pretend hard enough. The bread is coarse, made of rye or barley, and mixed with other mysterious additions. Beans, acorns, sawdust if times are hard and the miller's feeling creative. There is no butter, no jam, no joy. You sip from a wooden cup, not water. That would be dangerous. Water is often drawn from wells, rivers, or streams that double as bathing spots, laundry basins, and occasionally graveyards for small animals. Instead, you drink small ale, a very weak beer. Cloudy, slightly sour, and safer than the water. It won't get you drunk, unless you drink a lot of it, but it might keep you from dying of dysentery, which is the bar for success today. Children drink it too, even the little ones. No one finds this strange. It's just how things are. If you're fortunate, there's a scrap of cheese, probably hard and sharp, made from goat's milk, and wrapped in cloth to keep the flies off. If you're really fortunate, someone found an egg this morning, miraculously unbroken and unpoached by a neighbor with long arms and no conscience. But odds are, breakfast is just you, your bowl, your spoon, and the quiet resignation of survival. There is no such thing as a morning shower. You wash your hands by rubbing them with ash and water. Soap is rare. If you have some, it was made by boiling animal fat with lye, then shaped into rough gray lumps that smell like sin and dried smoke. It burns your skin if used too liberally, but it's better than nothing. Barely. You clean your face with a splash of cold water from a bucket outside. It's not refreshing. It's a punishment. Your fingers go numb from the chill, and the water carries the faint scent of last night's frost and this morning's dirt. You rub your teeth with a rag or a twig. Toothbrushes don't exist. You might chew on a bit of mint if you can find some, or rub your gums with salt and pray you don't lose another molar before your next birthday. That gritty crunch in your porridge? Could be barley. Could be enamel. Who's to say? Bathing, real bathing, is rare. If you live near a stream or a river, you might wash there when the weather is warm and the courage hits you. In winter, forget it. You'll freeze faster than you'll get clean. Baths are taken in big wooden tubs, shared by the family, and refilled infrequently because hauling water is harder than it sounds. Heated baths? Only if you have firewood to spare, which you usually don't. So most people bathe once a week, maybe. Once a month, more realistically. And that's the clean ones. You smell yourself. You wince. You move on. Clothing is not changed every day. You wear the same tunic, the same hose, the same underthings, if you have them, until they're stiff enough to walk off on their own. Washing them means scrubbing in cold water, often with sand or ashes, then wringing them out and hanging them to dry in the wind like sad, damp flags of surrender. You scratch an itch on your leg, another on your neck, another on your scalp. The lice are back. You combed your hair last week with a borrowed comb that definitely had someone else's name still attached to it, but the vermin don't care. No one is immune. Nobles, monks, children, everyone scratches. Fleas are common too. Bedbugs, rats, biting flies. If something can bite, it does, and it lives in your clothes, your bed, or your neighbor's beard. You reach into your sleeve and flick off a beetle. It's probably harmless. Probably. The chamber pot waits in the corner, a solemn reminder of everything you ate yesterday. You take it outside. Carefully. Down the single step into the shared yard, past the pigs, around the chickens. You dump it behind the hedgerow, near the ditch where all such things go. It smells. It always smells. There are no toilets. Not here. Not in your home. Not in most of Europe. Some larger towns have public latrines, long benches with holes in them, sometimes over running water, sometimes not. You sit beside strangers, make awkward eye contact, and try not to breathe too deeply. There are no partitions, no dignity, no flush. Just you, your thoughts, and the hope that whatever was lurking in the shadows last time isn't back for a second round. As for wiping, you use what's available. Straw, moss, a handful of leaves. If you're lucky, a bit of cloth. Most people are not lucky. Most people don't talk about it. You do what you must and return to the fire, still hungry, still itching, still vaguely ashamed of the century you've woken up in. You try not to step on anything too squishy on the way back in. By now, the house is more awake. Children are poking each other with sticks. Someone's chasing a goose with a broom. The elder of the family is muttering a prayer to Saint Roche, patron of plagues and dogs and people who have given up. You rub your arms for warmth and wish, not for a blanket, but for a reason to smile. There is none. Your stomach growls again. That little bowl of pottage wasn't enough. It never is. But there won't be more until the midday meal, if there is one. If the stew hasn't boiled itself dry, if the fire doesn't go out, if someone doesn't knock it over while arguing about turnips. You sigh. It's time to leave the house, to start your real work. The field, the mill, the forge, the animals, whatever your role in this small, suffering slice of medieval life is, it waits for you now. But before you step out the door, you pause. You scratch one last itch, adjust your belt, take a deep breath of air that smells like wet fur and yesterday's sins, and you go. Because in the Middle Ages, mourning isn't a time of peace or reflection. It's just the first round of your daily battle against filth, famine, and fate. And you're already losing. You step out into the world fully dressed in discomfort. The clothes you wear today are the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before, and likely the day before that. Not because you're sentimental, but because you only own one set of decent clothing. Maybe two, If someone in your family is unusually skilled at weaving or unusually connected to a mildly charitable priest. Your tunic is made of wool, not the soft, breathable, fashion-forward kind you see in modern catalogs. This is medieval wool, scratchy, heavy, and permanently infused with the scent of fire smoke and unspoken hardship. It was woven by hand on a loom that creaked like a dying ox, dyed with whatever plant was growing nearby, and roughly stitched together by someone with a bone needle and an attitude. The tunic reaches your knees if you're lucky, and falls in uneven folds that never quite sit right. It was probably passed down to you, or bartered for, or pieced together from the remains of two tunics that died in service. It's itchy. It's stiff. And somehow, despite all logic, it never truly dries. Beneath it, you may or may not be wearing undergarments. Linen brays if you're a man, a linen shift if you're a woman. They're rarely clean. They're never fresh. And they serve mostly to reduce chafing while doing the hard labor of convincing yourself you're not a barn animal. Your legs are covered in hose, tight wool tubes that do nothing to keep out the cold, and everything to let in fleas. They're held up by a crude belt, or more commonly, by gravity and prayer. If they sag, you pull them back up and keep moving. The world isn't going to stop because your legs are cold. On your feet? Maybe shoes. Maybe not. If you have shoes, they're made of leather, stretched and stitched by hand, and shaped into something loosely foot-like. They have no sole, no heel support, and no concept of waterproofing. After walking a few miles in them, your arches feel like they've been personally betrayed. If it's been raining, and it always has, they're soaked through, squishy, cold, and very possibly full of tiny, wriggling surprises. Most peasants go barefoot, especially in warmer months. Not for style, not to ground themselves, but because shoes wear out, and leather is expensive, and you can't exactly knit yourself a new pair from pig hair and broken dreams. So you walk barefoot through mud, animal waste, sharp stones, and whatever the village dog left behind at sunrise. Fashion? Not a concern. Your clothes are designed not to express yourself, but to keep your organs from freezing in the wind. That's it. There's no flair, no individuality, just browns, grays, and the occasional sad, faded patch of blue that hints someone once cared enough to throw in a few woad leaves during the dyeing process. Now, let's talk about your shelter. Home, sweet home. Or as it's better described, the box that leaks. Your house is not a house in the modern sense. It's a single-room structure made from wattle and daub. Woven sticks plastered with a delightful mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. Not because medieval folks were trying to be rustic, but because it was sticky, insulating, and, most importantly, free. The roof is thatch, a thick layer of straw or reeds piled high and tied in bundles to a wooden frame. It looks charming in paintings. In reality, it's a fire hazard, a nesting ground for birds, and a sponge for rain. It droops, it leaks, and if it gets heavy with snow or soaked through with autumn rain, parts of it may fall into your soup mid-supper. Inside, it's dark. Not mood-lighting dark, but nearly blind dark. The window, or rather, the small hole in the wall, lets in just enough light to remind you how gloomy everything else is. There is no glass. Maybe a wooden shutter. Maybe a piece of animal bladder stretched tight to filter the wind. You don't open it often, not because you're private, but because letting in more air means letting in more cold. The floor is packed dirt. It's been trampled down by years of bare feet, boot soles, and the occasional chicken. You try to keep it dry. You fail. When it rains, the water creeps in from underneath, turning the ground to a kind of gritty pudding. You throw down rushes or straw to soak it up. Every few months, you scrape off the old layer and toss down new ones. This is your carpet system. Your bed? A wooden frame if you're lucky. A simple pile of straw on the floor if you're not. Covered with a coarse wool blanket that smells of goats and last winter's mildew. Lice are standard. Bed bugs are recurring guests. Privacy? Not even a myth. Entire families sleep together in one room. Parents, children, grandparents, and occasionally a neighbor who just sort of stayed after supper and never left. If you're married, you sleep beside your spouse. If you're not, you sleep beside someone anyway. Because warmth is a group project. Children curl up near the fire pit. Elders get the least drafty corner. And the fire, the precious fire, must be banked with ash each night so it doesn't go out. Relighting it in the morning is a grim, smoky battle against wet kindling and despair. Furniture is minimal, a bench, a stool, maybe a small chest for storing the tunic you don't wear. The walls are adorned with nothing. Decoration is a luxury, and no one here is feeling particularly luxurious. And yet, this is one of the better homes. Some people live in huts with thatch walls. Others share space with animals, separated only by a wooden partition that the pig doesn't respect. The richer peasants might have 2 rooms. The truly wealthy might even have a loft. But for most, your house is not a fortress or a haven. It's a slightly drier version of the outdoors. It doesn't keep out the cold. It doesn't keep out the noise. And it certainly doesn't keep out the rats. Ah, the rats. They live in the thatch, in the walls, under the floor. They eat your grain. They chew your boots. They multiply faster than you can curse them. Traps help. Cats help more. But nothing truly stops them. Not in this century. Not in this village. Not with this much spilled grain and dried cheese rind. In winter, the wind howls through every crack. You stuff the gaps with moss or old cloth. It works. Kind of. Until it rains. Then the cloth freezes. And you spend the night huddled beneath your wool blanket, watching your breath curl in the air like steam rising from a pot you can't afford to fill. In summer, the heat suffocates. The thatch traps it like a sweaty sponge. The air becomes still, heavy, buzzing with flies, and the faint perfume of animal waste baking just outside your door. Still, it's yours. This hut, this tunic, this pile of straw and occasional comfort. It's not much, but it's what stands between you and exposure, between you and death. And in the Middle Ages, that counts as success. So you live here, you sleep here, you sweat and itch and shiver here. You call it home, even if the goat doesn't knock before coming in. There's no clock to tell you it's time to start working. Just the position of the sun, the grunt of someone outside already chopping wood, and the sound of your own internal dread saying, well, let's get on with it. Work doesn't begin ages. It never ended. From the moment your eyes opened in that shared, smoky room, you've been laboring, hauling water, tending fire, scraping together food. But now, the real work begins. The survival kind. The don't starve by winter kind. The break your back or bury yourself kind. If you're a peasant, and statistically you are, your day revolves around land. Not because you own it. You don't. The land owns you. It belongs to your lord, or the church, or some well-dressed man in a stone manor who's never once milked a goat or buried a child in frozen soil. But you still owe him rent, in grain, in labor, in silence. And so you work. If it's spring or summer, it's planting season. The fields are plowed with wooden tools strapped to oxen that are as tired as you are. You walk behind them barefoot, mud sucking at your heels, guiding a plow that kicks up stones, worms, and all your forgotten dreams. If you're too poor for oxen, congratulations. You are the oxen. You sow barley, rye, wheat, seeds that represent hope, hunger, and taxes all at once. You sprinkle them by hand, your fingers calloused and split. There's no fertilizer, no miracle grow, just manure and faith. If it's fall, it's harvest time. You work from sunrise to nightfall, sickle in hand, slicing grain with a rhythm that numbs your mind. It's hot, it's endless. Your back aches. You keep going, because if the harvest fails, you fail. And if you fail, you don't get another try. Winter is worse. You mend tools, chop wood, try not to freeze. The days are short, the nights long, and the food stores shrink with every mouthful. Every log you chop is one more night you might not shiver through. Every frozen bucket you carry is another prayer that the water won't kill you when it touches your skin. And all of this, every step, every swing, every aching breath, you do while wearing wool that itches and shoes that don't work. Your feet are wet. Your hands are cracked. Your breath fogs in front of you like a ghost, wondering why you haven't died yet. But maybe you're not a field worker. Maybe you've got a trade, a skill, a specialty. You might be a thatcher, laying reeds for someone else's roof, praying they pay you in more than old bread and vague promises. You might be a cooper, making barrels with tools handed down by a grandfather who died of the very same splinter in your palm. Maybe you're a blacksmith, your forge hot, your hands scorched, your lungs full of soot, and your shoulders permanently hunched from hammering iron into shapes the nobility will never thank you for. Or you're a tanner, boiling hides in urine and lye, standing waist-deep in vats that smell like someone murdered 1,000 shoes. You go home every night reeking so badly the dog won't come near you. But the shoes must be made. The belts must be stitched. The leather must be tanned. And someone has to do it. Congratulations. It's you. If you're a woman, your work is just as constant and somehow more invisible. You rise before everyone else. Tend the fire. Make the bread. Patch the clothes. Feed the animals. Nurse the baby. Watch the toddler. Boil the herbs. Milk the goat. Squeeze in time to spin wool. Weave fabric. Sweep the floor. Clean the lice, and serve the men their food while pretending not to be hungry yourself. Then maybe you help in the fields too, or sell vegetables at market, or help the midwife deliver someone else's child, while your own clings to your ankle with mud-covered hands and a cough that sounds far too familiar. And if you're pregnant, you keep working until you can't. And then you give birth squatting in a corner, bite a stick, scream into your apron, cut the cord with a knife still sticky from skinning rabbits, and go back to work. Because no one else is going to do it for you. Children aren't spared either. From as young as 5 or 6, they're put to work, gathering firewood, fetching water, scaring birds from the crops, herding animals, running errands, stirring pottage, stirring it again, stirring it some more. By the time they reach 12, they're practically adults, already losing teeth, already limping, already staring into the distance like they've seen things. And they have. And what about rest? There isn't any. There are no weekends, no holidays in the modern sense. Even feast days mean church, processions, cleaning, cooking, and pretending to be more devout than you feel. So the priest doesn't lecture your family from the pulpit. If you're lucky, you get a little beer, a bit of dancing, a story told beside the fire before the embers die and the cold comes back. Injury is constant. Your hands are full of cuts, your nails cracked, your knees bruised. A single twisted ankle could end your livelihood. A toothache could become an infection. An infection could mean death. You don't have a doctor. You have a neighbor with a knife and a handful of yarrow leaves who once saw a nun do something similar. Pain is part of your routine. You walk with it, sleep with it, ignore it until you can't. Supervision? You have that too. If you're a serf, the bailiff or reeve oversees your work. He keeps records. He checks your fields. He demands your tithe. If your crop is light, he doesn't care. If your child is sick, he doesn't care. If you're dying, he makes a note and reminds your cousin to pick up the slack. Some lords are kind, most are not. Some never even see you. You're just a number, a body, a tool, a harvest machine. You might be punished for stealing, for slacking, for owing rent. The stocks, the whip, the pillory, the cage. They're not relics. They're Tuesday. The village knows your crimes before you finish committing them. Shame is part of your daily outfit, tied around your neck like a scarf of failure. And still, you keep going. Because if you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't eat, you die. If you die, someone else gets your tunic and your share of that soggy field by the hedge. So you chop, you plow, you spin, you carry, you cook, you mend, you endure. Because that's all survival is in the Middle Ages. Pain, repetition, cold fingers, and the sheer stubborn refusal to let the century kill you one splinter at a time. Beliefs, religion, and superstitions in the Middle Ages. Your world is small, but the unseen forces shaping it are enormous. There are no weather forecasts, no medical diagnoses, no science that isn't wrapped in scripture or whispered behind church doors. What happens around you? Storms, sickness, failed crops, accidents, strange dreams. It all has meaning. Nothing is random. Everything is a message, a warning, a test, and you'd better be listening. Religion isn't something you do on Sundays. It's the air you breathe, the walls around your thoughts, and the reason you're still alive, or the reason you're being punished. You believe in God, not in the abstract, comforting sense, not in bumper stickers or casual prayers before dinner. No. You believe in a God who watches every moment of your life like a hawk circling a trembling rabbit. A God who punishes harshly, forgives slowly, and expects obedience in all things, actions, thoughts, and even dreams. You begin and end your day with prayer. You cross yourself when the bell tolls, when you pass a crossroad, when you sneeze, when a goat looks at you funny. Every action has spiritual consequence. Every breath has moral weight. The church controls time itself. Your entire calendar is built around saints' days, feast days, fasts, and holy obligations. You know what day it is not because of a number on a screen, but because it's the feast of St. Giles, or the eve of St. Agatha, or 3 days past Candlemas. The seasons are marked not by solstices, but by liturgical rhythms. Advent, Lent, Eastertide, Whitsun. And you know the rules. No meat on Fridays. No dancing on saints' days. No work during the Easter octave. No bathing on certain feast days, unless you want your soul to leave your body in the wash basin. You observe these rules, even if you don't understand them, because not observing them might lead to death. Or worse, eternal damnation. Hell is real, not metaphorically, not as a concept. You've seen the paintings. The church walls are covered in them. Demons pulling souls into fire pits. People being roasted on spits by gleeful imps. Tortured for gluttony or lust, or failing to tithe enough chickens. The local priest describes it in sermons with alarming enthusiasm. He also reminds you that your thoughts can damn you. A lustful glance, a selfish desire, a moment of doubt. All of these are sins, and sins must be confessed. Confession is not optional. You kneel before the priest. You whisper your failings into his ear. He listens. He asks questions, uncomfortably specific ones. Did you lie? Did you steal? Did you touch yourself in ways the saints would frown upon? You answer, you're ashamed. He nods. He tells you your penance. You do it. You move on. But the fear remains. You're told that the world is a battleground between good and evil, and your soul is the prize. Angels walk among you, so do demons. Some wear familiar faces, some are invisible. Some live in the woods and whisper in the wind. Some hide in sickness, or in tempting thoughts, or in the bottom of a forgotten well. So you obey. You light candles. You sprinkle holy water. You carry charms. You tie red thread around your child's wrist to keep away the evil eye. You hang sprigs of herbs in the doorway to ward off spirits. You leave offerings at crossroads. You never speak certain names after sunset. Is it all approved by the church? No, but you do it anyway. Because you live in a world where saints can heal, but also where witches can curse, where God is merciful, but where demons are very, very real. Your neighbors tell stories about the woman in the next village who gave birth to a baby with no mouth because she cursed during Lent, about the boy who whistled in church and was struck blind, about the man who saw a glowing figure at the edge of the woods and dropped dead the next morning. You believe these stories, not because you're foolish, but because your entire life is one long balancing act between divine favor and supernatural punishment. Superstition is your science. You don't know why the harvest failed, but you remember that your brother skipped Mass. You don't know what caused your child's fever, but you heard owls hooting at midnight, and the dog wouldn't stop growling at the window. The line between religion and folklore is as thin as your patience. You pray to the saints because they're closer to your level. Saints for lost things, for fevers, for childbirth, for madness, for swollen knees. There's a saint for nearly every part of the human body and every moment of human failure. You keep their icons close, kiss their statues, burn candles in their names. You know their stories better than your own, and if you're really desperate, you might go to the wise woman on the edge of the village. She's old. She smells of dried herbs and goat's milk. The priest says she's dangerous, but your child is sick, and her tinctures have worked before. She mutters over the baby. She burns a feather. She places a cold stone on the forehead and whispers the name of an old god no one speaks of anymore. You leave with a small bag of herbs and a warning to bury it under the full moon. You tell no one, because while you fear God, you also fear nature. The woods, the night, the unseen. Lightning means someone is angry. A sudden death means someone was cursed. A difficult birth means someone in the family sinned. You perform rituals without thinking. You knock on wood. You avoid walking under ladders. You turn your clothes inside out if you hear the wail of a banshee. You throw salt over your shoulder. You never look directly at a hair in the fog. You whisper blessings over bread. You cover mirrors when someone dies. And if a black cat crosses your path, you go home. You don't test fate. Not here, not now. Not when your soul might already be halfway to the fire. Even joy is dangerous. Laugh too loudly, you might attract the devil's attention. Celebrate too much, God might humble you. It's best to stay low, humble, quiet, respectful. Don't boast. Don't envy. Don't tempt anything, because everything is being watched by saints, by spirits, by dead ancestors, by God. You live under the eye of judgment, wrapped in ritual, surrounded by signs and omens you're too afraid not to believe in, and somehow it gives you comfort. Because in this uncertain world, at least there are rules, there is order, there is meaning, even if the meaning is terrifying, even if the order is impossible to please. You are a speck of dust in a vast, sacred, supernatural machine. And if you want to make it to the end of the day without disaster, you'd better keep your head down, your prayers up, and your shoes turned facing the door at night, just in case the spirits come by. Meals and social entertainment. You've been working for hours now, bent over fields, hauling water, swinging a hammer, scouring pots, swatting flies, ignoring blisters, counting splinters. You haven't checked your watch because, surprise, timepieces don't exist for you. The sun's just high enough to say, it's time to eat something or you'll pass out. But this isn't lunch as you know it. There's no break room, no microwave, no leftovers wrapped in foil from a cheerful dinner last night. Just you, a wooden bowl, and the faint hope that something inside it will not immediately offend your tongue. The midday meal is the biggest one of your day, not because it's generous, but because it's the one time you're allowed to sit down without being judged for laziness. The family gathers, sometimes neighbors, sometimes the local priest if he smells food from down the road. There's no table if you're poor, just benches or the floor. You eat with your hands or with a spoon that has survived more generations than your surname. And the food? It's edible, mostly. More pottage, always pottage. The eternal stew that lives in the pot like some culinary ghost, absorbing whatever happens to be around. Onions, barley, cabbage, maybe a few beans, maybe a chunk of salted meat, if someone caught a rabbit or if a pig recently stopped breathing. The taste? It varies wildly depending on who stirred it and what week it is. Sometimes it's too salty. Sometimes it's suspiciously sweet. Sometimes it tastes like despair boiled in rainwater. But you eat it because it's food, and food is not guaranteed. There's coarse bread, again. You tear it with your hands, dip it in the broth. It's gritty, full of husks and the occasional surprise pebble, courtesy of the local mill. Teeth are optional at this point, but appreciated. If you live near water and someone had the energy to try, there might be fish. Not fresh exactly, more like recently less dead. Dried, salted, or smoked into something that tastes like a boot and chews like one too. You gnaw politely. Wine? Not for you. That's a noble's drink. You're more familiar with ale, not the fancy stuff. Your ale is weak, cloudy, and brewed with whatever grain is left after the pigs have had their share. It's barely alcoholic and mostly warm. Still, it's better than water, which might kill you if the local well is feeling rebellious. And then there's cheese. Glorious, sour, rubbery cheese. Goat cheese, most likely. Sharp enough to bite back. Mold is normal. You cut around it. Maybe, maybe not. At this point, your standards are low, and your stomach is lined with iron and resignation. You might eat with your entire family. You might eat with strangers. You might not eat at all if your portion was accidentally taken by someone hungrier or more persuasive. No one lingers. You eat quickly, quietly. Then the bowls are licked clean, wiped with a crust, and stacked away. The stew will continue to simmer, waiting for the evening, when it will taste exactly the same but colder. So where's the joy? The laughter? The entertainment? Well, it exists. Sort of. After the midday meal, if by some divine miracle there's time, perhaps on a feast day, or a Sunday not ruined by chores, people gather. They talk. They joke. They complain. Mostly about taxes, or the weather, or someone's cow getting into someone else's garden again. If you're near a village, there might be a market day. That's a big deal. Vendors arrive, spreading out their modest goods on rough blankets or creaky carts. Cloth, tools, salted fish, herbs, suspicious bottles of medicine that smell like vinegar and lies. There's shouting, haggling, laughter. A pig squeals, a child cries, a lute player plucks out something vaguely melodic, and a few people dance, or try to. The market is chaos and relief all at once. A chance to see new faces, to buy a better spoon, to stare longingly at a meat pie you can't afford, to hear news from other villages. Someone died, someone married, someone stole a turnip and got whipped in the square. If you're especially lucky, a traveling performer might appear. A juggler, a puppeteer, a man with a dancing bear who smells like fermented onions and lost hopes. He tells stories, sings bawdy songs, balances on one leg while shouting about knights and dragons. Children love it. Adults pretend not to. You laugh despite yourself. It's the first time in days your ribs don't feel heavy. Taverns exist too. Cramped, smoky, and loud. The air inside thick with sweat, spilled ale, and regret. There are benches, ale mugs, and more gossip than the church would ever approve of. You drink what you can afford, usually not much, and try not to get into a fight with the blacksmith, who's been drunk since lunch and smells like iron and bad choices. Music. If someone has a pipe or drum. Songs are passed down by memory. Many are about saints. Most are about sex. You hum along anyway. It's the closest you'll get to joy. And festivals. Yes, there are festivals. Days when even the poorest peasants dress in their least stained tunics, gather in the square, and pretend life is less terrible. There's dancing, awkward, stompy, joyful. There are fire eaters, tightrope walkers, and a man pretending to be a bear, growling for pennies. There's a cart selling meat pies, another selling honeyed nuts, another selling lies. People drink more, talk louder, laugh freely. Girls braid flowers into their hair. Boys try to look brave, try to look calm. Old men nod and mutter about how the ale used to be stronger. You watch it all. You smile. And for a moment, it feels like you're not just surviving, but living. But these moments are rare. Most days, your entertainment is conversation. Jokes traded over laundry lines. Songs hummed while gathering kindling. Stories told in whispers after the fire's gone low. You laugh softly, try not to wake the children, and pretend, just for a moment, that you're somewhere else. Games exist. Stick and hoop, dice carved from bone, betting on how long the neighbor's goat will stare at a wall. Not elegant, not Instagram-worthy, but fun, if you squint hard enough. Love, courtship, also an option. In a strictly monitored, painfully awkward, and largely chaperoned way. You might sneak a glance at someone across the field. Trade apples, pass a note, assuming you can write. Mostly, you let your parents decide. Marriage isn't about romance, it's about survival. Two people pooling poverty into slightly less poverty. Still, there's warmth. Laughter shared over spoons of stew. Hushed jokes about the Reeves bald spot. Children playing with a stick like it's the Holy Grail. Someone carving a whistle from a bit of elderwood and playing it badly until everyone joins in. Because when life is this difficult, any joy, no matter how small, is holy. You don't need luxury to laugh. You just need a break from the cold, a bit of bread, and someone to sit beside you while the wind rattles the shutters and the stew refuses to boil. And if you get a story with your supper, that's a feast. You're coughing again. You've been coughing for days. It's not dramatic. Not the sort of thing a modern doctor would run a test for. Just a tightness in your chest. A rattle when you breathe. Phlegm sometimes. a little blood, maybe. But you don't talk about that. Because here in the Middle Ages, a cough isn't something you treat. It's something you survive, if you're lucky. Everyone is sick, all the time. Sickness isn't rare. Health is. And the absence of symptoms doesn't mean you're well. It just means you're waiting. Waiting for the next fever, the next swelling, the next wave of fatigue that tells you it's your turn to be humbled by the universe. Children die often, quietly, quickly. One day they're chasing a chicken. The next they're curled under a blanket, eyes glassy, breath shallow. You don't scream. You don't panic. You just hope they wake up. And if they don't, you bury them. Without ceremony. Without understanding. Without time to grieve. Because the fields still need tending. The food still needs cooking. The other children still need feeding. And death doesn't pause the rent. If you're hurt, by a fall, by a tool, by another person, you wrap it in a cloth and pray. Infection sets in fast. A small cut on your hand becomes a swollen, festering mess within days. You keep working anyway, keep working, until your fingers go black, until the pain becomes too much, until you can't hide it anymore. Then, and only then, you go looking for help. But there is no hospital, no clinic, no ER. You have options, sure, but none are comforting. You might visit the village healer, an old woman with sharp eyes and a pouch full of dried herbs that smell like old boots and regret. She mixes something into water, makes you drink it. It tastes like bark and burns your throat. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. You might call the priest. He'll bring holy water, say a prayer, anoint your forehead with oil. It's not medicine, but it feels like something. Sometimes people get better afterward. Sometimes they just die cleaner. And then there are the real doctors. If you can afford them, which you can't, they come wearing long robes, carrying bags full of instruments that look like torture devices and smell like wine, garlic, and arrogance. They speak Latin. They quote Galen and Aristotle. They bleed you, of course, because balance of the humors, obviously. You're told that your sickness is due to too much black bile, or yellow bile, or phlegm, or sin. Usually sin. So they cut you open, let your blood drip into a bowl, and declare you treated. You go home pale, dizzy, and still very much dying, but with slightly fewer sins in your bloodstream, so that's something. Leeches are popular, not because they work, but because they look impressive. They latch onto your skin, suck, drop off. You lie very still, hoping the wriggling doesn't mean anything too important is being drained. If you're lucky, you recover. If not, you're taken to bed. People visit. They sit beside you, quietly. They recite prayers, sprinkle holy water. The smell of rosemary and beeswax candles fills the room. A crucifix is hung above your head, not for comfort, just in case your soul tries to escape the wrong way. You begin to wonder if this is it. You've seen others die. You know the signs. The skin goes gray. The hands go cold. The breath slows. The eyes cloud. There's a final rattle, a final exhale. And then, silence. The body is washed, wrapped, laid out. Someone says a prayer. If the priest likes your family, he comes. If not, he sends an apprentice. The body is buried in the churchyard, or near it. Not too close. You're not that holy. You try not to think about it. But you do every day, because death is everywhere. You see it in the animals that don't wake up, in the children who stop growing, in the neighbors who disappear from their doorsteps and reappear as names whispered during Mass. And sometimes, it's worse. Sometimes it's not just a cough or a fever. Sometimes it's the sickness, the one people don't name, the one that moves fast, kills faster, and leaves behind pits in the ground and silence in the streets. You remember it from a few years back. Or was it last year? Time is strange in grief. People collapsed in the fields, in the tavern, at prayer. Boils formed, black, oozing sores, blood from the mouth, fever like fire, and then gone, sometimes in hours. The church rang the bell for the dead so often it cracked. They buried whole families in single graves. The streets smelled of death for months. You still remember the sound of carts rolling by with piled-up bodies, wrapped in cloth, with no one to mourn them but the man pushing the wheel. Some said it came from sin, from the stars, from the east, from cats, from women who made soup on Tuesdays. No one really knows. No one wants to know. They just want it to never come back. But you know it will. Everything comes back. The fever, the chills, the fear. The plague is patient. So you carry charms, you burn herbs, you avoid certain places. You wash even when it's cold. You cross yourself when someone sneezes. You don't talk about death, not directly, not when it's listening. You go to Mass, light candles, ask for protection. You recite your prayers, even if you don't believe every word. Because what if it helps? What if it's the only thing keeping the sickness from your door? There are no cures, only hope and herbs, and the strength of your body, whatever strength remains. You whisper over your child's forehead when they're feverish. You sing softly. You wipe the sweat from their face and lie when they ask if they're going to die. No, you say. But maybe, always maybe. Because in the Middle Ages, death isn't a moment. It's a presence. It lives with you, sits beside you, sleeps in the corner, follows you to the fields, waits in your stew. It doesn't wear black robes or carry a scythe. It wears your neighbor's face, your child's cough, your own fatigue. And it doesn't knock, it just opens the door and walks in. You hear her before you see her. A woman somewhere nearby muttering under her breath, not out of anger, but out of habit. A prayer, a chant, a counting of steps between the fire and the pot. She's been walking the same path since sunrise. Her feet know it by memory. The ground is packed hard beneath her. She's one of many. Because if you are a woman in the Middle Ages, you are always doing something. Even when you're still, you're watching the bread, nursing the baby, shelling peas, mending a shirt, shushing a child, listening for footsteps, planning dinner, mourning a miscarriage that no one talks about anymore. But you remember, your work never ends. At dawn, you're the first up, You stir the fire, boil the water, start the pottage. You dress the children, sweep the floor with a broom that's more twigs than tool. Then to the chickens, the goats, the milk, the eggs, the laundry. Then to the fields, because yes, you work those too. You carry water, gather fuel, harvest herbs. You help shear sheep. You spin wool. You dye it with plants that stain your fingers blue, brown, or green depending on the season. If you're lucky, you do it beside a friend, another woman. You talk as you work, not loudly, not carelessly, but just enough to make the labor feel a little less eternal. Marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's a contract, a transfer, a transaction. You're married young, 14, 15, if you're lucky. Younger, if you're not. You don't choose your husband. Your father does. Or your older brother. Or if you're orphaned, your landlord, or the local priest, or the woman who owes your family a favor. You're not asked if you love him. You're not asked anything. You bring a dowry, maybe a cow, a bit of cloth, a knife. He brings a roof and work and expectations. You move into his home. You sleep in his bed. You bear his children. And children come quickly. There's no birth control. Not really. There are herbs, superstitions, whispers, but nothing reliable, nothing safe. So you give birth often, in the corner of the room, on a pile of straw, surrounded by other women, their faces calm and practiced. A midwife guides you, maybe your mother, maybe your sister. They hold your hands, wipe your brow, cut the cord with a sharp blade, wrap the baby in linen. If the baby cries, there's relief. If it doesn't, there's silence. Some babies don't make it past the first night. Others past the first year. You don't cry, at least not where anyone sees, because you have other mouths to feed, other children to clothe, other burdens to carry. If you're a widow, which happens often, you remarry, not out of romance, but because a woman without a man is a target. For the cold, for the hungry, for the desperate. Your value is tied to your labor, your fertility, your silence. And yet, you are strong. You remember stories. You sing songs. You pass down wisdom about herbs, cooking, healing. You know how to stretch a bit of flour and water into enough bread to feed 5 hungry mouths. You know which weeds are edible, which mushrooms to fear, which days to gather what from where. You carry life and grief at the same time, every day. And the children, they are everywhere. Some barefoot, some half-clothed, all noisy, muddy, and more resilient than you ever were. They start working young, not because you want them to, but because they must. At 5, they're gathering sticks. At 7, they're tending geese, and at 10, they're pulling weeds, carrying water, learning the tools of the trade, whatever trade that is. School is for the rich. Your children don't read. Maybe the priest teaches them a prayer or two. Maybe they learn their letters on the church wall. But most of their knowledge comes from watching, mimicking, doing, failing, hurting, trying again. They play, too, sometimes, with sticks, stones, straw dolls, hoops made from bent branches, games with rules passed down from mouths that forgot where they began. Laughter echoes through the village, high and sudden and real. But always, there's the cough. There's the fever. There's the shadow that watches every mother. Because childhood is not guaranteed. You've buried babies, toddlers, children with soft hair and bright eyes. They fade fast, from a stomach ache, from bad milk, from sleeping too close to a sick uncle, from nothing sometimes. One moment they're running barefoot through the grass, the next, gone. And you go on. Because grief is part of the routine now. You love your children fiercely, but quietly. You don't make plans too far ahead. You don't say, when she grows up. I say, if. You hope. You pray. You hang charms. You teach them to be small, careful, obedient, so maybe the world won't notice them long enough to take them. Fathers are often silent. They work. They labor. They teach their sons how to swing an axe, how to tie a knot, how to look a lord in the eye without looking too long. Their affection is rare but not absent. A pat on the shoulder, a grunt of approval, a shared slice of cheese. Family life is not peaceful. It's cramped, loud, smelly, tense. You all sleep in the same room. You hear everything. Arguments, whispers, coughs in the dark. You know your mother's breathing, your father's snores, your sister's prayers. There is no privacy, no secrets, no walls to hide behind. And still, you find love, not the romance of stories, but something deeper. You hold each other when the wind howls. You laugh together when the goat does something stupid. You cry into someone's shoulder when the baby doesn't wake up. You pull together when the roof leaks, when the stew burns, when the world seems one cold breath away from breaking you. This is family. Not easy, not soft, but real. Tied together by survival, by routine, by blood and mud, and years spent sharing the same piece of sky. You dream sometimes of something better. A bigger house, a healthy child, a winter with enough firewood. You dream while combing lice from your daughter's hair, while stirring the pot, while watching your son swing a too-heavy axe with two small hands. You dream, but not loudly, because dreams are fragile here, and everything breaks eventually. Afternoon struggles and social conflicts. The sun's moved just past its highest point, though you wouldn't know it if no one mentioned it. You can't exactly check your watch, and the shadows don't roll quite the way they're supposed to today. Cloudy again. Damp. The air smells like wet wool and dung-soaked mud, which is to say, it smells normal. You should be resting after the midday meal, but of course, you're not. There's still work to do. Always more work. A fence to fix. A bucket to patch. A firewood pile that never stops shrinking. Your back aches in ways that have stopped feeling new. You press a hand to your lower spine, wince and keep going. This is your afternoon. You share the road with neighbors who don't make eye contact unless they have to. You all nod, grumble, mutter greetings. The social rules are simple. Don't ask for anything you can't repay, and don't speak more than necessary unless you're carrying something heavy, then you're allowed to complain out loud. Still, tensions simmer just under the surface. The man 2 doors down has a new goat. People talk. How did he afford it? Did he cheat someone? Steal it? Get in good with the Reeve? Everyone's smiling to his face but watching him from windows. Goat envy is real. Your cousin owes your Uncle barley from last harvest. He keeps saying he'll repay. He won't. No one says anything to his face, but his name gets muttered every time someone mentions the missing plow blade. And the woman across the road? The one with the perfect garden and the oddly full pantry? People whisper. They say she has a charm buried under her doorstep, that she curses cows with a glance, that her last 3 husbands died too conveniently. One fell into a well. One took ill after eating stew. One, they say, vanished into the woods and came back wrong. No one confronts her, not directly. But no one visits after dark either, because in a world this fragile, suspicion is the most natural flavor of conversation. And then there's the law, or what passes for it. If you steal, you're caught. Not because there are constables with badges and clipboards, but because someone saw. Someone always sees. You try to deny it. They tell the Reeve. The Reeve tells the bailiff. And by nightfall, you're in the stocks, hands and head locked in wood, open to the flies and the jeers of children with nothing better to do. If it's serious, say you struck a man in the fields or broke into the miller's storehouse, there may be worse, a public whipping, your shirt torn down your back, your skin opened in front of your neighbors, a brand pressed into your shoulder, a fine you cannot pay, or exile, being cast out of this village with nothing but the clothes on your back and a reputation that walks ahead of you like a barking dog. And for the worst crimes, murder, arson, heresy, there's the gallows, a simple wooden frame, a rope, a priest who prays over your shoulder, and a crowd that watches, half out of fear, half out of boredom, entirely out of habit. You've seen it before. You remember the sound the body made, the silence afterward. And yet, despite the punishments, justice isn't exactly fair. Lords don't answer for the things they do. The noble who takes more than his share of your grain, who strikes a boy in anger, who taxes a widow into starvation, he faces no stocks, no lash, just another generous seat at the feast table. Even the church has its shields. A priest caught in scandal might be transferred, not punished. A monk with wandering hands is whispered about, never named. You learn to keep your head down, to nod, to swallow your rage like stale bread. But sometimes, people snap. Fights break out in taverns, over debts, over insults, over women, over nothing. A mug thrown, a knife drawn, a table overturned. Then the scuffle ends as fast as it began. Blood on the floor, someone groaning. Someone dragged outside to cool off. No arrests, just bruises and grudges. Women don't usually fight with fists. Their weapons are sharper. Rumors, glances, silences, stories. A whispered word about someone's daughter. A question about who fathered that baby. A remark about someone's bread being a little too soft. And not in the good way. Words here carry weight. They stain. Call someone a thief often enough, and they become one in everyone's eyes, even if they never touched a thing. Even children have social hierarchies. The miller's boy won't play with the baker's son because of something their fathers said about a debt 10 years ago. The shepherd's daughter won't sit near the tanner's girl at Mass because her dress smells like urine, and she's not wrong. You learn these rules early. You carry them forever. And the tensions aren't just local. There's the village across the river. You don't like them. They don't like you. Why? Who knows? Maybe they stole your priest. Maybe their pigs got into your fields. Maybe someone said something in the 1200s, and no one ever forgot. You don't go there unless you must. And if you do, you keep your eyes low and your answers short. At home, there's conflict too. Family arguments that never end. A father who drinks too much. A brother who won't pull his weight. A daughter who talks back. A grandmother who still speaks of the old gods when the priest isn't listening. You love them, but you resent them, but you depend on them, but they annoy you. It's complicated. You sleep inches away from the people who drive you mad. You eat from the same bowl as the person you fought with yesterday. You borrow tools from neighbors you secretly loathe. You give bread to someone whose goat trampled your last decent row of beans. Why? Because you have to. Because this is your world. Your only world. No one is coming to fix it. There is no cavalry, no royal decree to make things better. Just another afternoon of biting your tongue, swallowing your pride, and hoping that tomorrow no one accuses you of anything. Because if they do, you're not innocent. No one is. And the wheel keeps turning. Nightfall, fear, and the shadow of death. The sun disappears quickly in the medieval world. There's no soft golden hour, no glow of street lamps, no warm kitchen light waiting for you at home. Just a slow fading from gray to black until you're swallowed whole by the dark. And the dark is not a peaceful place. You hurry to finish your last chores, bring in the animals, lock the gate, if you even have one. You stack wood by the hearth, stir the pot one more time, pull the last scraps of warmth from the fire, and hope that it doesn't go out in the night. Starting it again tomorrow will be a battle. But then again, so is everything. You go inside and you bolt the door. Not because it will keep anything out, but because it feels like a ritual. A line drawn between you and everything that moves in the dark. The bolt is old, the wood is warped, but you slide it shut with hands that remember every story. Because once the sun sets, the village changes. The paths you walked without thought during the day become unfamiliar. The forest hums with strange sounds. The corners of your home deepen into shadows that watch you back. Candles flicker and die fast. They're expensive, after all. Made of tallow if you're poor. Beeswax if you're miraculously rich. You burn them only when necessary. You've learned to see with very little light. A glowing ember in the hearth. A cracked oil lamp. The moon, if you're lucky. The air is colder now. Not sharp, but creeping. It seeps into your sleeves, your bones. It curls around your ankles like a warning. You wrap yourself tighter in your wool cloak and sit near the fire. You listen. To the house creak. To the wind push against the thatch. To the restless mumbling of a child in sleep. You don't speak much at night. Not unless you have to. Because the dark hears things and carries them. Some believe night is when the dead walk. Not with chains and moans, No, that's a story for later centuries. But with silence, with breath that doesn't fog, with footsteps that leave no print. They come looking for unfinished business, or for someone to join them. You cross yourself. You hang an herb bundle over the door. You whisper a prayer. Just in case, and if someone knocks after sundown, you don't answer. No good ever came from unexpected visitors after dark. A traveler might be a thief. A stranger might be sick. A knock might be the start of a long, terrible night. The village has its stories of creatures that move through fields when the moon is new, of witches who ride winds between chimneys, of devils that offer gold and take children, of lights that flicker in the trees, leading wanderers into bogs where no one returns. You say you don't believe in them, but you don't go outside to prove it. Because you know what's really out there. Wolves, maybe. Wild dogs. Hunger. Cold. And people. People are the scariest. Night is when crimes happen. When someone sneaks into a neighbor's shed. When debts are settled with fists or worse. When someone slips away to the woods to meet a lover, or a poison seller, or an informer. You lie on your straw bed and listen. You can hear everything. The breathing of the others in your household. The shifting of someone turning in sleep. A cough. A whimper. The wind rattling the shutters like bones in a sack. A dog barking far off. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. You remember the times you woke to screams. Not a dream. Real ones. The kind that yank you from sleep and fill your mouth with the taste of iron. A fire once tore through the village in the dead of night. You remember that. The glow, the crackle, the sound of timber collapsing, the frantic shouting, water buckets flying, someone wailing over what couldn't be saved. You smell it again now. Smoke, ash, the unforgettable stench of loss. Night is when fires happen. Candles tip. Sparks leap. Thatched roofs are kindling, waiting for a reason. You sleep light, always listening for crackles, always thinking, how fast could I run if I had to? But really, where would you go? The night doesn't love you. It doesn't welcome you. It consumes. And inside, it's not much better. You're crowded. 5, 6, maybe 10 people all tucked into the same room. One fire. One window. No privacy. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, sharing warmth, breath, and every bad dream. You try to shift quietly when your leg cramps. You pray your stomach doesn't grumble too loud. You hope the baby doesn't wake screaming again. If you're a woman, you sleep lightly, always alert. Because safety, even here, is not guaranteed. Not every man respects boundaries. Not every uncle can be trusted. And even if you're married, especially if you're married, there are nights you close your eyes and try to disappear. You sleep in your clothes, not for warmth, but because it's easier. Easier to be ready, to flee, to fight, to face the cold if you have to run. There's no soft cotton, no flannel, just wool and linen that itch and bunch and hold every drop of sweat from the day. You lie on your straw mattress, flat, damp, crawling with the quiet tickle of fleas, and you wait for sleep. but your mind keeps wandering. You remember a neighbor who died in his sleep, just didn't wake up. Some say it was a stroke. Others say he sinned too often. One woman swore she saw a shadow over his door that night. You don't ask for details. You just look at your own door and whisper something to Saint Michael. You think about tomorrow, about how tired you'll be, about what work lies ahead, about the roof that still needs mending, about the missing chicken, about the sore on your heel that hasn't healed in weeks, about the price of barley, about your cousin's debt, about your daughter's cough. You think about how fragile everything feels, and you feel fear, low and slow in your chest. Not panic, not terror, just the slow, gnawing fear of living in a world where one small thing, a fever, a fire, a missing child, a bad harvest, a word spoken to the wrong person, can end it all. You stare into the dark. The fire pops. You close your eyes and hope the night passes quickly. Because in the Middle Ages, nightfall is not just the absence of light. It's a reminder that death is never far and sleep is never certain. And now, at last, sleep begins to edge in, not with comfort, not with peace, but with exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that isn't dramatic or loud or even interesting, just heavy. A quiet weight that settles into your limbs and whispers, "Enough. You've survived the day. That's all the reward you get." Your eyes close not because you're safe, but because your body simply can't keep them open any longer. You feel the straw beneath you. It crunches softly as you shift your weight. Something scurries in the corner. A beetle, probably. Maybe a mouse, maybe something worse. You tell yourself not to care. Beside you, someone breathes through their mouth, loudly. A child rolls over and murmurs in their sleep. The fire cracks faintly in the hearth. All of it blends together into a soft, living hum. The sound of people simply surviving together in the dark. There is no mattress, no pillow, no white noise machine, no soft cotton sheets or memory foam. There is only the scratchy cloak you're wrapped in, the stale smell of bodies and smoke, and the steady thrum of fatigue beating gently behind your ribs. And still, you sleep. Because you have to. There is no other option, no other escape, no other break in the long, hard rhythm of medieval life but this. Sleep. Temporary, imperfect, occasionally interrupted by cold or cough or footsteps. But still, sleep. And as you drift, somewhere between now and not now, you realize how little of life in this century belongs to you. Your time belongs to labor. Your body belongs to work. Your thoughts are guarded by religion. Your fate is wrapped in superstition. Your safety is decided by weather, animals, illness, and the mercy, or lack of it, of people more powerful than you. And yet, you endured. You rose before the sun. You ate what you could. You worked until your back screamed. You smiled once or twice. You whispered a joke over the soup. You shared a crust of bread. You dodged arguments. You feared nothing and everything all at once. You did it. You lived another medieval day. That in itself is a kind of triumph. And now, as the fire dies, and the house grows quiet, and the final embers cast their red light against the rafters like tiny flickering stars. You allow yourself a single slow breath. You made it through this day. Tomorrow will be hard again, and the day after, and the one after that. But right now you sleep. And as you lie still in the gloom, you realize something even deeper, something strangely peaceful. You do not have to wake up here. You do not have to live this life. This world, the straw bed, the chamber pot, the boiling pottage, the fevers, the fear, the cold, the calluses, the crawling things in the night, it is not yours. It was real. It happened. And for millions, it was everything. But not for you, not now. You're safe in a room with walls that don't breathe, on a bed that doesn't itch, surrounded by silence that isn't threatening, with light switches, and medicine, and water that won't kill you, with windows made of actual glass. You live in a world where privacy is possible, where warmth is not a miracle, where illness doesn't always end in burial, where a bad night isn't followed by a worse morning of hauling water and hiding fear. You have choices. You have time. You have air that smells of nothing. And that is something worth holding close, because tonight you walked through a world that once was, and it was hard and sad and ordinary in the hardest ways, and you made it. You've earned your rest now. So as you lie back, breathing slow, I want you to take a moment, just one small moment, and be quietly, deeply grateful. Grateful that when you wake up, it won't be in a smoky room with fleas in your blanket and frost on your breath. You won't have to scrape ashes to light your fire. You won't have to eat from a splintered bowl. You won't have to worry that a toothache could kill you or that a knock at the door means ruin. You'll wake up in a world that, for all its imperfections, has come a long, long way from the dark silence of a medieval night. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in the Middle Ages. Sleep well.